Some exhaling in the Eastern Conference for a few teams for now. Welcome to NHL Wraparound Short Shifts for Friday, October the 17th, 2025. The usual cast of characters here. Sabres, Islanders, Senators. Much needed wins over the last couple of nights.
They sure are, especially when you talk about the Sabres and the Islanders. Those two teams were throwing an offer, so they needed it badly.
We did the show on Wednesday, NHL Wraparound, with Mike Harrington from the Buffalo News. Needless to say, we took our shots at the Sabres, and people are going to say, well, look, you guys did a show and you knocked the Sabres and they turned things around. But if you listen to the entire show, we made some pretty accurate points here. And towards the end, we asked Mike, what do the baby steps look like? And he says, we got to get the power play going. And we've got to have a strong first period. Well, they didn't really have that strong a first period, but they did get 20 shots in the second. They held firm. They got guys to the net. And more than anything else, they got a little bit of puck luck. And you look at the first goal that they scored. And sometimes these are the things that turn things around for a club, at least in the short term, where Jack Quinn took a shot, came off the glass and back over the net, and then caromed off the skate of goaltender Levi Merrillainen for Ottawa, and that got the Sabres on the board and really set the tone for the night.
They put all the boo birds behind them and all the negative thoughts behind them and all the black cloud cleared above them, and for one night they played really well and got that win over the Brady Tkachuk-less Ottawa Senators.
And we're going to have more on that in just a second. But that power play that I mentioned, 3 for 3 in only 2 minutes and 39 seconds of advantage time. Jason Zucker had a couple of power play goals. Zach Benson, first game of the year, he gets 4 points, all assists, jumps to the lead in Sabres scoring. He set even the third star of the game.
That's a tough crowd there in Buffalo. Tough crowd picking the stars.
So, before everybody gets on the Sabres bandwagon again, remember that one game does not erase 14 years of futility. And they've got 5 and 8 days coming up, starting Saturday against Florida, at Montreal next Monday, home against Detroit on Wednesday, and then a home and home with the Maple Leafs next Friday and Saturday. So it's a good first step, but that's exactly what it is, a first step.
They've got to make up for the early poor start during this 5 games in 8 days. They can't come out of that with a 1-4 in 8 days, or they're going to be right back where we saw them before last night.
Let's continue on with the Senators because they played on consecutive nights and were in danger of going 1-4 to start the season. And a little bit of perspective with this is that a couple of years ago, you remember, Neil, that they had a very light schedule at the front end of the season. They had a couple of games in Europe. They got well below 500, and they were trying to make up ground in a very backloaded schedule, which they were never able to do. And with Brady Tkachuk now out for up to 2 months, originally it was expected he might only miss 4 weeks with the hand injury that was suffered against Nashville on Monday. Turns out that he had surgery on his right thumb, and now he's going to be out 2 months. Knowing that, they went into these 2 games first thinking he was going to be out 4 weeks. Now it's going to be 8 weeks. And in their game against Seattle on Thursday, Dylan Cousins tied the game with under 2 minutes left. And then Shane Pinto, who had his 6th goal of the season earlier in the game, seals it up with the shootout winner. That's just an enormous win for the Ottawa Senators as they just try to hold steady with the absence of their captain long-term into December.
And they're going to have to play by committee now and just work around this. And, I was sort of surprised the way they played against Buffalo, because a lot of times when a team loses their most important player, they end up stepping up to a higher level as a group, and they weren't able to do that. But we'll see if they can stay in the fight through these next 2 months.
You were at this game on Thursday. The Islanders, with their first win after 3 losses, defeating the Edmonton Oilers 4-2. Bo Horvat with a hat trick that erased a 2-1 deficit starting late in the second period, had a shorthanded goal to tie the game, and then the winner late in the third on the power play and added an empty netter. But the story of this one, and a lot of people are talking about it, so why not us, was just an absolutely dreadful night by Oilers defenseman Evan Bouchard, who's making $10.5 million this season.
It was just horrific. And Edmonton as a whole was bad. The only guy that I can tell you I thought was great was Skinner. He made some terrific saves in that game. Even McDavid, you're looking for 97 to do magical things out there. He didn't do a lot of stuff. Draisaitl did get a goal, as he usually does. But it wasn't the Oiler team that I saw in the final the last 2 years in a row. This was a team that they just looked sloppy. They didn't look good, and particularly Bouchard, who we know has that rocket from the point and can get a lot of points for them. But man, oh man, was he bad defensively. I mean, the Barzal goal, that Barzal picked his pocket and then went right in and scored. It was embarrassing, to be honest with you. I thought that they'd play a lot better after their victory at Madison Square Garden. They had a night off in New York, then go out to Long Island. But no, they didn't play very well at all.
Bouchard makes an average of $128,000 per game. I used a calculator because my long division sucks. But that game check should go towards charity. And maybe it did, because he was certainly charitable to the Islanders all of last night between his puck handling, decision making. Ray Ferraro made a great point that this is the thing that's going to keep him off the Olympic team, because he is simply too high risk.
He's very high risk, and last night it just wasn't good. So look for him to bounce back in their next game. I would think he'll be having a talk with Paul Coffey, who, by the way, had nights like that himself when he played. And Chris Knobloch will, I'm sure, talking to the defense and to Evan Bouchard in particular about last night. But last night's game is one of those ones that you just want to, park it and forget it.
It was a butcher shop. And the funny thing was the official stat sheet from the game had him only listed with 2 giveaways. It was 3 or 4-fold, if anybody was paying attention. So sometimes when you come to those subjective stats where it's one person's opinion, sometimes you got to take it with a grain of salt. And 2 giveaways last night, absolutely not.
By the way, just as a side note, for the Edmonton Oilers coming in, and I know the New York market better than anybody, but for the Edmonton Oilers, 2-time runner-up the last 2 years in a row for the Stanley Cup, heralding 2 of the very best players in the world in McDavid and Draisaitl, 2 highly compensated defensemen in Nurse and Evan Bouchard. Boy, it was a very skinny crowd at UBS Arena last night. There was a lot of people dressed as empty seats in that building.
You know a place that there are very few empty seats nowadays?
I think I do. The Bell Center?
That be it. Because more magic for the Habs on Thursday, down 2-1 in the final minute to Nashville. Lane Hudson gets in front of the Canadiens' net, stops Jonathan Marchessault, and then gets a pass off to Cole Caulfield, who ties the game with 20 seconds left. And then Caulfield gets his second consecutive overtime winner, because he did it 2 nights earlier against Seattle. A nifty feed from Nick Suzuki with 3 seconds left in the overtime, in which goaltender Jakub Dobeš stopped a 2-on-0. Canadians are 4-1, and this team is starting to feel it after making the playoffs a season ago.
Yeah, and you wondered would they play the way they did down the stretch to get into the playoffs starting this season, Or would they go back to the way they played most of last season and be right mixed in with the bubble? Well, it looks right now, and we don't know what the future is going to bring, but it looks right now like they're picking up where they left off at the end of last season.
As we mentioned, Canadians are 4-1. Want to also note other clubs around the NHL that have yet to lose in regulation. Carolina, only perfect mark in the league at 4-0, following a 4-1 win in Anaheim on Thursday. Seth Jarvis, 2 goals and an assist. No regulation losses in the West. Colorado, 4-0-1. They defeated Columbus 4-1 on Thursday. Seattle, 2-0-2. And the Vegas Golden Knights, 3-0-2 after defeating the Bruins 6-5 on Thursday, but that was not the big news coming out of Sin City, as Carter Hart has joined the team on a paid tryout. Remember, he was acquitted in July, along with 4 other members of the 2018 Team Canada World Junior Championship team, the others being Michael McLeod and Alex Formenton, who are playing in Europe. Dylan Dubé and Cal Foote remain unrestricted free agents. Now, in the statement from the Golden Knights, they continue to say the right things in terms of the decorum that they expect from their players. Hart himself has said, I've learned a lot, I've grown a lot. Well, you got to certainly hope so after an episode like this. But this is the first team, being Vegas, who has always been aggressive in terms of acquiring players to put their toe in the water with one of these 5 players.
Right, but it doesn't mean you're going to see him necessarily on Vegas. Isn't he starting in Henderson, which is their American Hockey League team, just down the road from Vegas?
He's eligible to begin his conditioning stint on November 15th and eligible to play in the NHL on December 1st. And it is expected that this contract will turn into a 2-year deal. This was reported by Emily Kaplan on ESPN on Thursday. Akira Schmid wound up playing for the Golden Knights against the Bruins on Thursday, gave up 5 goals on 24 shots, was pretty leaky in that game. And you would have to think at some point Hart is going to be no worse than the number 2 goalie in Vegas. Aiden Hill was the backup on Thursday after he got dinged up a couple of nights earlier in Calgary. But how do you see this all falling out? Not necessarily in December, but as the season rolls on.
Well, I think it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for Hart to miss this much time and come back and pick up where he left off with Philadelphia. Remember, in Philadelphia, by the end, he wasn't playing that great. He wasn't a franchise goalie. And so now he's missed all this time. He's obviously got a lot of other stuff going on in his head. Anybody would that's made the kind of mistakes that he made that cost him a lot of time away from hockey. So we'll see what he can do with Henderson, meaning the Henderson team in the American Hockey League in Henderson, Nevada, and see if he can get up to the Golden Knights, the big team, and displace Schmid with that team. Or if there's an injury, of course, he'll get an easier chance to get up there. It's going to be hard to anticipate what will happen when you miss that much time. And goaltending is something that you got to practice over and over and over again. You can lose your timing. I would think, I'm not a goalie, but I would think you can lose your timing pretty quickly when you have time away from the net.
Hart's last game, January 20th, 2024, with the Flyers in a loss to the Colorado Avalanche. Other goaltending news, Devin Cooley made his Calgary Flames debut in the Utah Mammoth home opener on Wednesday. Played well, stopped 29 of 31 shots in a 3-1 loss. Last goal was an empty netter. But he did stop Logan Cooley, no relation, on a breakaway towards the end of the first period.
Yeah, so good for Devin Cooley, who gets his first start. I don't know what Calgary's thinking about. They can't wear down their number 1 guy and only play Cooley once in a while. So maybe this will give them some incentive to put him in more often and go maybe 2-1 for Wolf and then get Cooley in more often than he's been in.
Who was it that Detroit acquired during the offseason that was supposed to solve their goaltending woes? It was John
Gibson from the Anaheim Ducks, long-time goaltender, standout goaltender for the Anaheim Ducks.
After a disastrous opening night loss, Cam Talbot has come in and won the last 3 games for the Red Wings with a 1.78 goals against average and .932 save percentage. This could be nothing but good news if Talbot's playing that well.
That's true. And, of course, Gibson goes into tonight's game to be the starter for the Red Wings with a shocking save percentage of .615 and a goals against average of .806. So that's, of course, because he only played the one game and took a bad loss in that one. But he'll go up against probably Vasilevsky down 180 feet from him down in the net for the Tampa Bay Lightning when they play each other tonight at the Little Caesars Arena.
Phoenix Copley traded from the Lightning to the Kings for future considerations after the Lightning claimed Copley off waivers from Los Angeles on October 2nd.
But we know that their starting goaltender in L.A., who they got from the Washington Capitals in the trade for your favorite player.
And Darcy Kemper for Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Pierre-Luc Dubois. Darcy Kemper has been injured, and so that probably was the impetus of Ken Holland and staff calling back to Tampa Bay Lightning and saying, do you really need Phoenix? Because we'd like to have him back here.
Anton Forsberg wound up playing Thursday night in a 4-2 loss against Pittsburgh. And the Kings were also without captain Anze Kopitar, who also is nursing a lower body injury. One other piece of goaltending news, Jacob Markstrom, out 2 weeks with an upper body injury suffered late in Monday's win in Columbus. Nico Dawes has been recalled. But Jake Allen, 16 saves on 17 shots Thursday in a 3-1 win over Florida. Speaking of which, another long-term injury for the defending Stanley Cup champions, 2-time defending champions, in fact. Dmitry Kulikov, labral tear, and is out 5 months. And, of course, in his best deadpan during his press conference yesterday, Paul Maurice said, we're not allowing any short-term injuries this season. And, of course, they're already dealing with the loss of Alexander Barkov, Matthew Tkachuk, and Tomas Nosek.
You know what, Vic? People say, what do you think the chances are of them getting the 3rd cup in a row? And you know, it's hard in the NHL. It's just hard. And they're starting off this way. The Stanley Cup playoffs are a long, long ways away. So who knows by then. But this is the kind of stuff that happens. And this team has played the distance 3 straight seasons. Yeah. 3, not 2. 3 straight seasons they've gone to the final. And as we know from talking to the New York Islanders and Edmonton Oilers and teams that have done it before, it does wear you down over time. You're going to get injuries. People get older as the years go by, quite obviously. So we'll see what happens with Paul Maurice and his Cats. You can't help but sort of cheer for them with the bad luck that they're having so far this year.
But ever the philosopher, Maurice said, the weight doesn't get any heavier at this point. We just have fewer guys to lift it. You got to love him.
Yeah, it's a cerebral guy.
One of the great things about hockey that no other sport has is the changing on the fly. And that extended to the Pittsburgh Penguins TV booth on Tuesday evening when play-by-play man Josh Getzoff passed out during the second intermission of the Penguins-Ducks game. JoeBrand moved over from radio to call the third period with Colby Armstrong, and then Director of Team Operations Jason Seidling took over for Brand alongside Phil Bourque on the radio side. Getzoff did not work Thursday in LA, but is looking forward to returning Saturday when the Penguins play in San Jose. But it just goes to show, Neil, that as much scrambling goes on during the course of hockey games with player changes and adjusting to injuries can actually happen off the ice as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing that they take their radio guys with them, right? What if they were doing simulcast? They wouldn't have anybody there to do it. So we hope Josh Getzoff is good and is healthy and gets back.
And reportedly was actually in the building at Crypto.com Arena for the Pens win on Thursday. Before we wrap up the show, happy belated 90th birthday to Willie O'Ree, who celebrated on Wednesday, the first player of color in the NHL on January 18th, 1958. He is still out. He is still active today. And I got to tell you, Neil, if there is a tonic to look that good, be that active, and remain this relevant on your 90th birthday, get me the sign-up sheet.
Yeah. Where is that tonic? Where are they selling it?
So as we head into the weekend, who scores their first goal of the season first? Alex Ovechkin has got games against Minnesota on Friday, Vancouver on Sunday. Connor McDavid, Saturday afternoon in Jersey, Sunday afternoon in Detroit. Or, as we start to promote our next show on Monday, which will be short shifts, the New York Rangers, who are trying to avoid the all-time home goal futility record to start a season. Where's your money?
My money is on Ovechkin getting the first goal of him, McDavid. And, of course, it's tough because the Rangers don't play that home game until Monday. So I think the first goal, though, that's scored out of those is Ovechkin, knowing him and his desire to score. I think he's got a way bigger desire to score goals than McDavid. McDavid's more of an all-around player. So I think OV will do it.
So if neither of them score, and even if they do, what are the possibilities of the Rangers playing without a goalie for the first 7 minutes and 19 seconds against the Wild in order to avoid breaking that mark set by the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1928?
You know, it's going to be tough in all seriousness. I mean, how many times do teams score within the first 8 minutes of their home game? It's not an easy thing, and so we'll see if they can do it. I'm sure that Mike Sullivan's not going to be in the locker room saying, "Come on, guys, we got to get out and score in the first 8 minutes." I'm sure he couldn't care less. He wants to win the game, and that's it. You know, maybe somewhere in the back of his mind, because of the media asking him about it all the time, they'll be looking to win that game, as they weren't able to beat the Toronto Maple Leafs in Toronto last night.
Losing on an overtime goal by Auston Matthews. But that record, it's going to be what it's going to be. And if the team winds up winning the game, nobody's going to care anyway in the long run.
As far as most of the public knows and been told by the media, that they've already got the record of 3 straight games. No other NHL team has ever done this, is what the media is saying. Well, that's true. None of the other existing teams have ever done it. But the Pittsburgh Pirates of 1928 actually went longer. They didn't go more games. They just went longer minutes-wise. Their first 2 games of their season ended 0-0 and went into overtime, which was 10 minutes regardless of anybody scoring. So that meant 2 70-minute games, which is 140 minutes. And then in their third home game, a goal did go in by the Pittsburgh Pirates. So that's all the minutia of that.
That's plenty of minutia also, a lot to remember. And we'll get into that a little bit more Monday on short shifts. And also we want to remind you that our website, NHLWraparound.com, we've got Smith's Picks, Neil's Nuggets, and of course New York Centric, written by Patrick Hoffman. But in terms of your Smith's Picks, you're still 10 games over 500 for the year. You kind of got a rough break on Thursday because you won your first 2 games, lost the last 3, which you had leads in all of them. And I think if those games were played later in the year, teams tend to button down, and you probably would have been 5-0.
Yeah, and it's tough to predict it at this time of year because, like last night, who would think with a rested day in between games that the Edmonton Oilers, the mighty Oilers, could go in and not play very well against the rebuilding New York Islanders. And yet that happens when you're this early in the season. But remember one thing, folks, those 2 points that the Islanders got, that the Oilers squandered, they're just as important as those 2 points at the beginning of April that you're trying to get so that you can get into the playoffs, or you can get into first place, or you can jump over another team. So points are points, whether they're gained in October or April.
I think we'll end it with that Osage one. So we'll see you on Monday. And don't forget NHL Wraparound next Wednesday with the longtime voice of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Joe Bowen. Have a great weekend, all.